What do you guys think about the abortion thing in Texas? So, there's a bounty being offered to anyone who reports anyone even remotely involved in providing an abortion for some poor girl who got raped. And there's no bounty whatsoever for someone reporting the person who raped her. It doesn't even have to be an ex-lover, it could be an abusive spouse or an extended family member that is angry that their future grandchild was aborted, because the mother didn't want to bring a child into the world to continue the cycle of abuse. I have a friend who found out she was pregnant with her then very abusive boyfriend. She got an abortion, broke up with him. He later found out and lost it, showed up at her apartment and raped her, getting her pregnant again. She again had an abortion. She called me shortly after I had my 2-year-old, sobbing, telling me about all of this and her incredible guilt over the 2 abortions, but she said she could not in any good conscience have this guy's babies. Now with what Texas has done, I think of her and just how myself thank fucking God she doesn't live there. Yes, they can be investigated to ensure you didn't cause their miscarriage. However, remember, Republicans think science is a key, so they won't understand what things do and do not cause miscarriages. For instance, exercise will not cause a miscarriage, carrying heavy items will not cause a miscarriage, obviously depending on the weight of said thing. Eating certain foods will not cause a miscarriage. I could go on and on. But, since Republicans think science is icky, and you miscarry after doing any of these things, they might have you imprisoned, despite the pesky science. Remember, also, Republicans think that if you were raped, and you didn't want it, then your body has ways of shutting that stuff down, so, why should you be allowed an abortion? You obviously wanted it because your body didn't shut that stuff down, so now you have to suffer by having the baby. Oh, and don't forget, your rapist also gets parental rights now too. 2. They believe ectopic pregnancies can be transferred into the uterus, science that literally does not exist. So, if you miscarry an ectopic pregnancy, you can be investigated because why didn't you have it implanted? And that is just some of their anti-science thinking bullshit. So, yes, miscarriages will be investigated. I honestly don't know how these laws can stand with HIPAA. Every single one of these laws violates HIPAA because they would need access to your medical information to verify whether you were even pregnant in the first place, and they don't have access to your medical information without a medical authorization, which you are under no obligation to give them. If they try to imprison you to get the med-auth, that's unlawful imprisonment because you were innocent until guilty, so they can't just hold you indefinitely. I hate that they don't teach this part in school. I did have a fairly decent sex education in elementary middle school, in FL of all places, and my dad was a college professor, my mom is an RN, so they didn't baby talk this stuff with me. They did not want to be grandparents early. But even with all this, I only learned, fairly late in life, after my best friend had her first. Pregnancy is calculated from your last period. 6 weeks pregnant could mean the sperm met the egg 2 weeks prior. It's not a baby. It's a non-viable teeny tiny 6 mm fetus that looks like a messy tadpole. The pregnant person doesn't know for 6 weeks and does nothing. They miss their period, and before they even know that they're pregnant for sure, follow up with a DR's blood test, their options are taken away. I'm glad you just learned this, but I hate that more people don't know these things. Sorry for the wall of text, but this is so frustrating. Edit to clarify some parts. Part of the point is to force hospitals, doctors, clinics, etc. into a position where they are bogged down in defending against these suits. It's not necessarily about the women themselves. It's forcing healthcare centers to stop offering the services, even in the case of a miscarriage, or to drain them financially. Doesn't matter if the abortion was pre-6 weeks or was a procedure to remove a non-viable fetus, providers will still have to defend themselves in court, wasting time and a lot of money, even if they do win their cases. Providers will stop offering important care to women to avoid the risk of lawsuits, and those that don't will receive the brunt of the burden. My girlfriend was probably a bit later in pregnancy, and we weren't sure she was. There had just been hints we pushed off because you don't want to accept it when you're teens, right? Anyways, she told me last night she's going through a miscarriage right now, and I genuinely didn't think it'd get to me, but I started to tear up when she told me, and that's the first time I've cried in a very long time. I just haven't been able to forgive myself because we were teens just fooling around going to parties and drinking because that's what teens do, and it killed my kid, and if I would just recognized the signs then I would known to stop her and my baby would still be alive. Sorry, I just needed to rant, and my grammar and punctuation is going to be terrible because I'm on my phone and obviously have things to care about a bit more, haha. I'm so sorry. Honestly, in the time frame, it wasn't anything she did. Alcohol does not cause miscarriage. Partying does not cause miscarriage. In those first 8-ish weeks, miscarriages happen almost exclusively because the fetus is not viable. It never would have survived no matter what. Unless your GF beat herself in the stomach with a baseball bat, she did not cause this. It is not her fault, it is not your fault, and it could not have been prevented. Please be kind to yourself and to your girlfriend. Exactly. If they think an abortion is literally the murder of a baby, then you'd think that they would be willing to do everything in their power to prevent this from ever happening via comprehensive sex education, greater access to sexual health testing, benefits for children, affordable health care, etc. But they're the exact opposite. It makes no rational sense at all, yet their base eat it up and pride themselves on being the good guys and champions of the unborn. Aside from the fact that anyone who is pregnant and doesn't want to be should have access to safe and free abortions, especially those whose pregnancy is the result of sexual assault or incest, what about the people who are happily married with children already who just can't afford to have another child? Since no contraception is 100% effective in preventing pregnancy, are these women supposed to just stop having sex with their spouse altogether until menopause? What is their solution? Edit, spelling. That's the idea. Progressive, independent women, along with some liberals, move away from the fascist state, leaving behind more voters only. Voter suppression and filling prisons with minorities have allowed RS to win elections, but that is not going to be enough as shown in the last couple of election cycles, so make fascist laws prompting likely D voters to leave, or think twice before moving there. Problem solved. What's funny is a lot of Republicans are super scared about this law. Go over to our conservative and about half realize this types of law could be used to go after gun owners. I don't think this is going to play out well for the Texas legislature or governor, or Republicans who back it in general. I'm pro-life, light, and I don't know WTF they were thinking with this law. If actually enacted, the potential for abuse is catastrophic, and the idea that people with no vested interest can do this to a random fellow citizens is moronic. 6 weeks literally gives you less than 2 weeks to schedule an abortion after your period is late. Hell, I'm 16, and there's no way I'm getting pregnant soon, and my periods are sometimes a week late. How the fuck are women without access to out-of-state travel gonna do this? It's effectively the same as banning abortion altogether for poor people. I literally feel fucking sick, and the Supreme Court did nothing. Nothing. The bill was written to be convoluted and fucked up and impossible to challenge, and now it's here to stay. It's like the fucking Handmaid's Tale. People giving tips to the fucking government for their own personal benefit? Suing people for violating a law that might not even affect them in the slightest. Is this 1600s era Salem? A fucking abortion witch hunt? I really never thought it would come to this, and now I'm scared. I live in a state with a Republican legislature, and now it's clear that they could pass the same shit here. I did fertility treatment and took a test every single day. I found out it was successful at 3 weeks and 4 days, and even then it was a maybe. That is the absolute earliest you can find out, and that's from a very wanted, highly tracked pregnancy. That's before my miss period, which is on average at about 4 weeks pregnant. You are absolutely right that most people wouldn't realize until 5+ weeks, and that's if they have pretty regular cycles, which, spoiler alert, being humans, not clocks, many women don't. What people don't know or see that as these types of laws go into place, the sexual health education is defunded, and the private institutions like Planned Parenthood or such hot-button names spend greater than 87% of their budget on sex education. Grants to school districts to put programs in at-risk youth schools. More than 60% of graduating seniors in the state of Texas couldn't pass a national standard health exam because it's no longer a mandatory required credit to graduate high school. 18-year-olds going out into the world not knowing simple facts about their own bodies. These laws went into effect 10 years ago, so what was a bad problem is now a worse problem because every way they could prevent the thing they don't want happening, teens getting pregnant outside of marriage, they've undermined. So the inevitable end is more uneducated, unprepared, poor, lower class or even middle class kids, going on to have kids they can't afford to have who then live off the state because they didn't know how to prevent it or what their options were or how to be safe. And the cycle goes on and on. For many women on birth control, for example, women with IUDs, they don't get their period every month, so if they got pregnant, it could take up to 8 weeks plus or even more for them to find out if they're pregnant. The 6-week abortion ban is terrifying because people can do everything right to prevent pregnancy, but still not know until it's too late for them to take appropriate action. This abortion ban not only contributes to the war on women, but it's divisive and will cause harmful and unanticipated consequences. Also, the US is a very shitty place to be pregnant or give birth. In 2017, at a time when maternal mortality was declining worldwide, the World Health Organization, WHO, reported that the US was one of only 2 countries, along with the Dominican Republic, to report a significant increase in its maternal mortality ratio, the proportion of pregnancies that result in death of the mother, since 2000. While the US maternal deaths have leveled in recent years, the ratio is still higher than in comparable countries, and significant racial disparities remain. Source: https://www.commonwealthfund.org/issue-brief-report/2020/United-States-primer. If people in the community want to vilify women that have abortions, then the community needs to step up. They need to be offering free babysitting, help preparing meals, help with utilities or any other needs that a young mother may have. I would venture to say that having an abortion isn't something that she is thrilled about doing, and if she thought she could raise her child, she would. I had a baby young. It's not easy. Either step up and help or back up and shut up. This message is meant especially for the church. They are the most at fault with shaming the young mothers for aborting and still not offering help when the girls make the choice to keep the baby. It's self-evidently unconstitutional, and they designed it the way they did in order to get around judicial review, since it's not the state who's bringing the suit but little snitch-ass tattletales or people seeking money for screwing over another person. The reason I think it will ultimately be ruled unconstitutional is it upturns every notion of standing that's ever been conceived of. That is, why is this your business? By the logic of this law, a person should be able to sue to stop a fucking colonoscopy because they think it's wrong to stick things up people's butts. Not because it affects them in any way at all. I am an outsider, Norwegian. But from out here it looks like religious zealots are attacking women's rights all across the nation. Some places more vigorously than others. But there seems to be a national trend of misogyny, not really sure how to spell that word, means hate towards women, all across the US. It makes me nervous, as the USA has a bad tendency of using bullying and violence to push their ideals on us out here in the rest of the world. And we don't really need our religious idiots having the backing of the US when they try to erode women's rights over here. I don't get how it's okay that they are forcing underage girls to have a baby when you aren't even allowed to adopt a baby when you are underage. Or how they are punishing the women who have an abortion worse than a rapist. Also, I don't like that there will probably be an increase in kids going to orphanages because the women don't have enough money to raise them or were an unwanted pregnancy. We should have just let them secede in the 19th century and offered asylum to escaped slaves. They'd all have starved to death and or come crawling back because their economy was based on free labor. Or we could have just taken over and killed every Confederate adult and willingly handed the South to black people. But the rest of the US was still too racist. That's why the South is still so fucking poor. So many never learned how to stand on their own 2 feet. Plus the poor educational system and theocratic beliefs. I think the Supreme Court has demonstrated cowardice here. For a start, they've effectively reduced the right to an abortion to almost nothing. But they don't want to admit they did that, so they've just allowed this law to stand even though it clearly goes against earlier rulings, and they are too cowardly to overturn those earlier rulings. If they are going to ban abortion, then they should ban it. This approach they are taking is downright cowardly, and you could even call it manipulative. By ruling in this way of allowing it without admitting they've overturned the earlier established law, they're basically lying to the American people, and it's a cowardly outrage that the Supreme Court judges are operating that way. As a children Texas woman, this is both dehumanizing and terrifying. The fact that a non-existent fetus is placed as more important than a living, breathing person is so wrong. Abortions will continue to happen, but now women will be subjected to secrecy and hiding from health professionals. Women deserve to have access to safe abortions for whatever reason. It's even more terrifying for me because I have PCOS, so regular BC pills don't work for me. Stopped after 10 years of failures and having to deal with the effects. Frankly, this law makes me never want to have sex with guys in Texas because you never know who actually supported me being treated like a second-class citizen. If these a-holes want to play ball with this BS, then they can choose to love their left or right hand, and sock or no sock. I would encourage all women to do the same unless they can trust their partner and have several ways to access safe abortions outside of Texas. Lack of love might change their minds real quick. Elections have consequences. 2016 complacency allowed a loudmouthed ignorant minority to further erode our democracy and pile unqualified theocratic hacks into our courts. Never skip or cast another vote for a fascist GQP candidate ever again at any level, no matter how unhappy you are that your Democratic candidate didn't win the nomination. The only way to eradicate the filth that has hijacked this country is to use their tactics. Always vote D no matter what, to never negotiate a single point. Get rid of the filibuster, pack the courts, pass strong voter rights laws, pass abortion rights legislation, tax churches that enter the political realm, and cut off the PACs because votes should not be weighted based on dollars behind them. It's doubly infuriating because there are these huge states that people write off as Republican states, and a lot of people, especially liberal and leftist Twitter personalities, take a line that is almost "you did this to yourself." But even Texas, the banner red state, still only went red in the last election by 5.5%. That's 46.5% of the state that voted, did not vote for Republicans. The governor had 42% of the state vote against him. Florida gets hit as a now red state but consistently votes within margins. Trump won this past cycle in a landslide, which actually meant 3%. So still roughly half the state voted against him. The governor there only won by 0.04%. If I somehow got pregnant tonight, my period isn't until around the very end of the month. That's about 4 weeks. My period often doesn't come on time. I've had them all over the place my whole life. I probably wouldn't go, my period is missing until 2 weeks after. That's 6 weeks. The thought of something being wrong wouldn't occur to me until my next period, 8 weeks. Plus time to find tests or a doctor. I'm thinking of friends who have had children. Most didn't know until 8-9 weeks. Of other friends with slightly wobbly period times. Of one that had an abortion and took 2 weeks to think and discuss. I have an intense phobia of pregnancy and a history of suicide attempts. I wouldn't figure out in time. If I did have the time, it would be days, hours to arrange it, no time to think. My life would be in danger immediately. I can't stop thinking about that. I can't stop thinking how many people are going to have to be paranoid and anxious or in danger, or having to make a decision on their future in such a short time span. Imagine finding out and having like 3 days to decide if you want that baby while your emotions are everywhere and regretting that whichever path you took later. I'm not in the US, UK here, and I don't even know how this works in terms of money. How quickly and cheaply can you access a doctor concerning the time limit? Perfect example of the United States, this case Texas, making laws with no logical thinking and pure emotional reaction. Similar to the war on drugs and how well that helped us. Now back ally abortions are gonna happen, causing more death and more strain on the medical system. They offer a bounty for turning in a girl if she got an abortion. Like this is some lynch mob society. Yet no bounty on the person that raped her. Makes sense. If someone left the state, got an abortion and came back after the treatment, what is Texas going to do? Prosecute someone who did something outside their state where it was legal. Yeah, good luck. I'd like to see that case go to the Supreme Court. There is no current clear line scientifically that defines when a human is alive. But it ranges somewhere between when you know to a baby being born. Is killing a couple fertilized cells killing a human? Is using a condom killing a human? The Bible says pulling out is a sin, which is where a lot of anti-abortion stem from. at least in the United States. Hell, some people believe Plan B is an abortion even though it stops pregnancy before the egg is fertilized like any other type of birth control. But I'm pretty sure these people just don't know how Plan B works and or doesn't understand basic biology. Bottom line, until we have more than philosophical theories and actually have evidence to explain these things, abortion should be left alone. Especially given the fact that 99% of the time Jane Doe down the street getting an abortion has virtually zero effect on your life. Also, I don't want to see a 12-year-old forced to carry a baby after getting raped by some piece of shit. Meanwhile, people will be more focused on her not getting an abortion than finding the asswipe who did it. The law is logically dumb and it is getting very close to a separation of church and state issue. But I'm just a random 23-year-old guy on Reddit and don't live in Texas, so take everything I said as my opinion. Fuck Texas, fuck that law, and fuck everyone against abortion. Maybe even literally if they can't get an abortion, maybe it'll teach them. But seriously, I may be very progressive with this shit, but why the fuck would you not allow abortion? Forcing someone to keep it may have so many bad outcomes. And people will still get an abortion if they absolutely need it. Just an illegal, more expensive, very unsafe one, putting more lives at risk. Texas be very dumb. Also, offering that bounty. How about a bounty on people who rape? Another thing, I read somewhere, IDK how accurate since I'm not from the US, that getting an abortion may have worse consequences than raping someone. At that point you know they just want to say, hey, fuck woman. And then we're not even talking about minors yet, so they are not old enough to rent, have rights over their own bodies, parents still have that then right, work, buy alcohol and many more. But yeah, force them to have that fucking child, even if it was rape. My god, I hate the people who think up these rules. Honestly, I think it's so awful. They are stripping women of the rights to their own bodies. I get it, an abortion is a sad thing, but what's even worse, in my opinion, is a child being raised by another child, or a rape victim, or someone who isn't able to fund them. Even the children being put up for the adoption will have miserable lives. Texas emo should have focused on improving the fostering and adoption system before they even considered these new abortion laws. Children in these situations are going to have parents who weren't ready to be parents, which could result in low quality of life. More people are going to suffer from this law than there initially was before, and it's awful to see. I just hope that all of the money being raised will help women who need to get out of the country for the medical care they need. It is wrong on so many levels. I had an abortion in an extremely abusive relationship. Men have rights to the baby. Why would you need to bring an innocent child into an abusive relationship? Why would you want a child you cannot take care of? Why would you want to put a rape victim through that? Texas should not be applauded, but it is extremely wrong to force anyone with a child they don't want. So how is Texas going to support all these unwanted kids? Are they opening free daycares for the needy? Are they going to provide housing for young people kicked out of their homes for being pregnant? Are there WIC programs in all poor areas? Are they offering free birth control for teenagers? Problem is the conservative don't want to invest in preventing pregnancy or helping the poor. How many conservatives want free healthcare or actually helping the poor? This just makes them anti-women and pro-life until you are born, then fuck you. This is a calculated decision by the GOP leadership in Texas. The tide has been steadily turning over the course of my life here in TX, and this kind of nightmare legislation is designed to discourage moderate and liberal voters from moving or staying here so the Republicans can maintain their vice grip on power. I'm not saying I recommend moving to Texas, but we could really use the help, and it's disheartening to hear how well their plan is working. Uprooting our lives is not easy or even feasible for everyone in most cases, but least of all with the financial burdens the pandemic caused. I think abortion should be permitted, no questions asked, up to a point. Once the fetus develops to a point that it begins to seek comfort or exhibits behavior that shows some level of cognitive action should be the cutoff. Usually this is around week 26, and when I personally consider the fetus to be a separate entity and entitled the opportunity of life. I am by no means an expert, but my rudimentary understanding of fetal development has led to this conclusion. If I'm wrong about these concepts, I would love to further my understanding. As for Texas, where I currently reside, I have never liked their approach. To me, it seems they attempt to force doctors to traumatize their patients in an effort to halt the abortion by forcing them to hear the heartbeat and looking at the fetus, then have to think about halting the production for 6 weeks, all the while furthering its developing into a human being. By the time it's viable, around 26 weeks, the only abortions done are out of absolute medical necessity. No woman wakes up 6 months pregnant and decides, "I changed my mind." Something went wrong and the baby would either be born dead or die minutes after being born, and it's inhumane to make a pregnant person continue to carry these pregnancies. Imagine that happening and people in public pointing at their stomach and saying things like, "Oh, congratulations, boy and girl," when in reality it's going to be born dead. My neighbor told me that happened to her in the 60s. Those late-term abortions are performed on grieving mothers who wanted their baby. I'm enraged that politicians are trying to dictate what I can and cannot do with my uterus. They're trying to put themselves in the middle of a decision that should only involve the woman and her doctor. I was pro-life and conservative for a long time, but I finally got why abortion is so vital when I got sick with lupus. I was started on a drug called methotrexate. I was on the pill the entire time and thankfully never got pregnant, but had I gotten pregnant, the fetus would have been anencephalic due to the methotrexate being, quite literally, a toxic medication. I would have gotten an abortion because a baby without a brain, I just can't even imagine going through that. It was then that I became pro-choice. It was because I don't know everyone's circumstance,